Whereas the operators I've been talking to are quite downbeat about 6G still. The message is we don't want to spend lots of money. There's not going to be a big investment cycle. Something might change that, but there's not a huge appetite for going and investing a lot. And there's there has been an expectation that it might just be an evolution of fight. Now this is where Ray's going to sort of start pushing for something other than that to be introduced, which could happen. But one possibility is that that doesn't happen and it just becomes a sort of continuation of 5G. So Bruno Zabiba Orange, the CTO at Orange, who's been quite anti-6G in terms of his rhetoric about it, he said that the whole message in America is not really 6G. They're kind of conflating 6G with new spectrum being awarded.
Yeah.
Just because you take advantage of new radios in higher spectrum bands and you have to put more antenna elements in, that doesn't really make it a generational leap, and that could be what 6G is. So.
Hello and welcome to our traditional on-site Mobile World Congress special of the Telecoms.com podcast. We're on the Wednesday afternoon. Everyone's knackered. Are you feeling nice and fresh, Ian?
No. Thanks for asking.
And just like last year, due to overwhelming demand, we've got a bunch of guests. So we're starting with special guest Mike Dano, former colleague of ours, now Ookla analyst.
That's
Mike
right.
Dano.
Hi.
And returning guest Ray Dolan from Cohere, who we last had on the podcast in Dublin.
Correct.
So we'll do a bit of catching up there. And I think, the obvious thing to do at this Mobile World Congress podcast is just start by asking you what the main themes, what you've been chatting about at the show. So can I start with you, Mike?
Sure.
What's been coming up for you?
Yeah.
By the way, cheers, everyone.
Cheers.
Cheers.
Thank you. I think it's kind of a good show. I think I'm coming at this from the perspective of an optimist this time around, and
Right.
I'm kind of interested in the stuff that they're talking about. There's AI, there's wearables, there's AI RAN, there's 6G. The thing that I am most interested in is satellites. So the Starlink.
Well, that's come up a lot.
What's that?
Satellites have come up a lot at the show.
Hugely.
Yeah.
Hugely so. And I got to sit in the Starlink keynote and listen to their very short keynote presentation about the announcement that they had this week. And real interesting. Lots of satellite developments. So I don't know if you guys caught the
No, we did actually report on it, but I didn't have time to read the story, so I don't even know what their announcement was this week.
Yeah, pretty interesting stuff, I think. I mean, I'm big fan of
Can you summarize it?
Yeah, for sure. So I asked about the keynote presentation because it was it was not super polished. I actually was kind of surprised. It was all of like 15 minutes
It wasn't
long.
media trained.
Yeah, they kind of were like, you need to go do this real quick, and they were waited. They got. The video started before they were ready, and they sort of talked over one another, and it was I was like, I was kind of surprised.
At the Telecoms.com podcast, we embrace amateurishness and sloppiness.
I actually kind of appreciate that it's like, not super polished.
Yeah.
They're busy launching rockets and satellites practically every day.
Yeah.
And so
they got better things to do
exactly,
than polish PowerPoint.
literally, that's how I thought it came across. Is like, we have better things to do than make this super. They had some nice video, and they obviously had some interesting things to talk about. But not super polished. Anyway, but they announced the next generation of their direct-to-device satellite constellation, and when it was going to launch, a little bit of the capabilities. I mean, we already sort of knew that was going to happen, that they were going to refresh that constellation, but we just got more of the details about what it's going to look like, what the capabilities are going to be like, that kind of stuff.
I'm still a bit of a direct-to-device skeptic, if I'm honest, just in terms of what it's used for. I understand that it closes, it can offer sort of ubiquitous coverage and that sort of thing.
It's when you go rock climbing and you fall.
Yeah,
and
exactly.
you've broken your leg, Scott.
It was. In fact, on the LinkedIn from our last podcast, our friend Charlie Ashton, who likes to go on endless walks along the Appalachian Trail, was saying how he welcomes it for that reason.
Yeah.
But that's kind of a niche use case, isn't it?
Yeah, exactly. And I think the second generation is obviously going to be better than the current generation. So twice as many satellites, 1,200, and then they said speeds up to 120 megabytes per second.
Oh, that's a fair bit.
If there's one person in the area.
5G-like speeds, right. Yeah, and so the analysts at New Street Research did some capacity calculation based on what they said and how many spot beams are going to be directed by all the different satellites and stuff. And so they said, it is not a replacement for terrestrial. They said 0.1% of terrestrial capacity is what that second generation network would have.
Do you hear anybody at all talking about either direct-to-device or the more sort of conventional stuff as a possible future replacement? You know, I always think people like Elon Musk and Jeff Bezos are getting into this because possibly they see some future point.
There must be some reason they're chucking so much money at it.
Yeah, but I haven't talked to the people who know a lot about satellite, like Tim Farrar or something, who agrees with that thesis.
I think there is some speculation about that. I don't think it's going to happen anytime soon. I mean, the announcement that they had with DT was that DT would basically roam onto their second generation D2D network, right? So it wasn't like it was Starlink Mobile MVNO, and oh, by the way, you can also use DT network. It was not that. It was that DT is the provider, and their customers would still roam on to Starlink Mobile when that deal gets started in 2028. So, it is not Starlink Mobile going to direct to consumer.
We might come back to that, but I want to ask Ray the same question. But before I do, Ray, I've got to deal with the elephant in the room. Obviously, the biggest news from the show this year was Accenture buying Ookla.
Yeah, Ray?
Big news. And I was saying, so, you know, we know Mike, he used to work at Light Reading with Ian, and I was winding him up before we started, because obviously it's only just been announced. Mike's not authorised to talk about it at all. So I promised to just keep asking you questions about it and try and get you sacked. Anyway, that's that.
I didn't catch that last part.
Yes, congratulations.
Yeah.
Before we go any further, I'm delighted to announce that this podcast has a sponsor. Unperturbed by our unorthodox style, Cohere Technologies has decided to take the plunge. For any listeners that missed our previous pods with its CEO, Cohere is the innovator behind Universal Spectrum Multiplier software for 4G and 5G, and Pulsone technology for 5G and 6G coexistence, ISAC and NTN. Thanks a lot, Cohere. Your support is much appreciated. So now that I've got that out of the way, so Ray, I mean, we can talk about the show. I'd also be interested to know what's been going on at Cohere since we met up in Dublin, but perhaps we can just start with the show. What have been the main things you've been talking about here?
Sure, I think it's been a great show. I think I'll make Mike happy because, you know, he likes unpolished answers to prove that you've got a lot of other things going on, so I'll try to live up to that expectation here, Mike. We've seen almost everything that you've brought up, and how Cohere fits into it. We've seen the evolution of 4G and 5G to get better, cheaper, faster with spectral efficiency, but we've also seen satellites and everything that our technology does to resolve delay and Doppler on Earth only is magnified when you're going faster and further away. All right. So we've got a huge opportunity ahead of us, and we're seeing the satellite sector is on fire.
Yeah.
We've seen AI is awesome. We're live now in a network in Canada with a mature third-party vendor. We're sitting right behind. What we're seeing right now is amazing. What we are seeing and extracting is, in fact, the data set that's going to drive AI rev. And we're capturing that in a portal. We're exploring that with the AI RAN Alliance. AI is absolutely for real. And I say 6G. Last year, if you were here, people said, I'm not sure I want 6G, but if I do, I want to make sure nothing changes. Which is like
so what's the point of it?
So people would be like, then why are you calling it 6G? It's like, I don't know, because it's been 10 years.
Yes.
This year, ISAC has taken the world by storm. Now, I know you're skeptical about it based on what we talked about.
Well, only that I just need someone to explain why I shouldn't be. That's
so hopefully I'll get an opportunity to do that. But we, so sensing is the next big thing. And I think people are right now linking sensing to military applications and warfighters and drones, et cetera, which is in fact extremely valid because warfighters basically translate situational awareness to advantage. But in a consumer sector, it's hyper-localization. It's knowing not only where you are, but everything around you. And that's absolutely monetizable, okay? And we're used to sensing. It's all around us. If you've got a Nest or a Ring doorbell, if you've got, you know, a little token in your luggage, you know what sensing is, but this is sensing at massive scale, where every antenna is a sensor. And every space station has multiple sensors looking down, out, and up. and cellular networks are going to transform as fast to sensing as they did from 3G to 4G. If you just remember, we sat here for years saying, what's the killer app in 3G? And it turned out it was voice. And the shortest life cycle of any technology was 3G. And LTE was deployed as fast or faster than any technology on a global basis because it created new revenue in mobile internet. And if we can create new revenue in consumer sensing and enterprise sensing and automation and things like that, you're going to see the revenue growth drive profitability. It'll be a very exciting industry to be part of. And we're seeing that in all of our discussions with everybody.
The antennas pointing down, out, and up as well. I mean, that's not how they have been done, which sounds like quite a big oval. But could you see a scenario where, say the military funds that, but there's civilian use cases that can kind of piggyback off it?
Well, there'll be joint use. There'll be some level of funding that rides on top. Like right now in the US, public safety has funded a collaborative network architecture called FirstNet that AT&T runs for them, and they fund a significant amount of the CapEx and OpEx, and as a result they have a preemptive right on that network. So that's a collaborative model. I would expect public safety and potentially military applications to collaborate and fund parts of cellular networks, but no, I'm talking about this would be as a network architecture that's self-funded as well.
Yeah.
Because if it drives the right consumer and enterprise opportunity, there'll be so much money in it. It'll pay for itself over orders of magnitude. As a result, I'm very bullish about 6G, and we've had discussions this week, even this morning on a panel, that would never have been anticipated even 6 months ago.
Really?
Yeah.
In the areas that you were just describing.
In the areas of sensing and what it means for military, what it means for public safety, what it means for transportation, and what it means for consumer and enterprise applications.
So when I did a blog a few years ago, and I thought it was a bit silly, like you're sitting in a pub and the sensor detects that your beer's nearly finished, and it triggers an alarm to go and for the barman to come and fetch you another one. That's actually something that could happen, it seems.
Well, that'll be near field communications. That's not a cellular application. That's
right.
If somebody puts a barcode on it. I mean, 20 years ago, if you said, I'm going to check out of a store and everybody's just going to swipe things and swipe things and swipe things, you'd be like, really? Well, barcodes are ubiquitous. So there'll be replenishment models that have like automated scanning processes, and people will bring new things, and that's not what I'm talking about. I'm talking about industrial automation that has such reliable communications from a network, just like surround sound in your house. There'll be surround radiation that's highly automated, that allows for extremely precise robotics. And that's the other thing people are talking about is robotics.
Yeah. But Vodafone I think they put out a blog this week, or was it last week? I can't remember. They were talking about potential use cases for ISAC in a consumer setting. And it was literally things like losing your keys and needing to find where they are or something. And I can imagine I could see that's something that people might want to pay for, because it's not like you don't feel like, if you get another connected device, it always seems to be part of the same tariff package that's attached to your phone. We'll bundle in some headphones or a watch with it, and it's probably tethered to it anyway. But the idea of like, I've lost my keys, I can get notification of where they are I'd pay a couple of pounds at least a month for that. I'm sure I would. Well,
and that
no?
I mean, I guess.
Like anything that you lose, you could have something that tells you where it's going to be.
It's like we've got the heater at our house is connected to the Wi-Fi, and I disconnected it because why? It's too much. It's too. I don't want that.
Well, I think you make a good point there, Mike. It has to be really compelling. I mean, one of the things you were talking about the previous generations, Ray, and of course, famously, with 4G, it was a very important, very transformative technology, but most of the value extracted from it wasn't primarily by telcos, was it? It was what we used to call OTTs, over-the-top players, the big US tech companies, that sort of thing. And do you have any thoughts on, if, with your vision for 6G and ISAC and that sort of thing, do you think the telecoms industry is going to do a better job of retaining a bigger piece of the action this time around?
Yeah, I do. First, I think that it has become true over time, but the first 5 years of LTE were massively profitable for everyone. It was only when all you can eat was like, holy moly, can they eat, right? That the CapEx to revenue models started to creep up to break even.
Okay.
The initial CapEx to revenue models were insanely profitable. And that's why actually I think people didn't see coming the leakage that was going out the side, because everybody was making so much money. But as it got competed down at the network level, the social media players are just sitting out there sucking, parallel, and the handset players that used to be free. If you remember, 15 years ago, it was free phone, free phone, free phone, free phone, and the leadership at the top of the phone industry rotated every year from Motorola to Nokia to Ericsson to Motorola to Nokia. And now it's been stable at the Android and Apple ecosystems, which is, of course, it's Apple on the iOS, but there's a series of Android players, and those are quite stable.
Even the market share within Android is quite stable, isn't it? Samsung's always number one globally.
But the initial run was very profitable. So two things. I think the initial run sensing is going to be massively profitable, just like last time.
Okay.
But the operators are more savvy to prevent the leakage. They're going to establish who owns the data for sensing.
Yeah.
And that's going to have a security aspect as whether you trust it. Plus, it's going to have a monetizable aspect as to, hey, look, if I work so hard to get this data, I'll collaborate with you.
Yeah.
But I want a piece of the pie. And I think the operators we've had discussions where operators are a lot more savvy now than they were 20 years ago.
Yeah.
For a lot of good reasons.
So.
Yeah, well, I think we all are, honestly.
Yeah.
I'm not keen to bash them for that, but I don't think anybody saw coming that at the very same time mobile broadband was happening. I don't even think Facebook saw it coming. They didn't even have a mobile app when this all happened. If you remember that, they were all about computers, and actually Facebook was under pressure for about a year as a stock because no one thought they could port to a mobile.
Yeah.
Right.
If you remember that.
Yeah, I do remember.
All right.
Yeah.
So it was not obvious. Like the operators didn't have their head in the sand where everybody else was brilliant. The whole world had their head in the sand as to what mobile internet really meant.
That's a good point. And with the benefit of hindsight, it all seems obvious, but at the time, not so much. What was I going to say? I was going to ask you, Mike. We've spoken about 6G a little bit. To me, it feels very early to be talking about it. I was kind of surprised. That's definitely been a theme for me this year, is how much more prominent 6G has been than I thought it would be. We're all aware of this once in a decade cadence and all that sort of thing. But I'll still argue, as I've many times on this podcast, that's a bit artificial because it was only really established between 3G and 4G between 2000 and 2010. And now, for some reason, we now think it's set in stone that every 10 years we have to do this. And I actually asked a question at the Nokia event on Sunday because they were talking about it a lot. And Justin Hotard, the CEO, was up on stage and I asked him, what do you think 6G's all about? Why are we talking about it now and what's going to be exciting about it? And the thing he mentioned, which I think we might have said a minute ago, is the robots. And you were talking about all these. And so there's an interesting thing. I don't know if anyone, I'm not just directing this at Mike, and I know I'm waffling a little bit, but I am getting to a point.
I think he's going out on a bit of a limb there, to be honest.
Yeah,
and I don't think other people...
physical AI and kinetic tokens and all that.
I mean, I think I don't see him really being in alignment with the industry conversation at Mobile World Congress this year about 6G, whereas the operators that I've been talking to are quite downbeat about 6G still. The message is we don't want to spend lots of money, there's not going to be a big investment cycle. Something might change that, but there's not a huge appetite for going and investing a lot, and there has been an expectation that it might just be an evolution of fight. Now this is where Ray's going to sort of start pushing for something other than that to be introduced, which could happen, but one possibility is that doesn't happen and it just becomes a sort of continuation of 5G. So Bruno Zabiba Orange, the CTO at Orange, who's been quite anti-6G in terms of his rhetoric about it, he said that the whole message in America is not really 6G. They're kind of conflating 6G with new spectrum being awarded.
Yeah.
Just because you take advantage of new radios in higher spectrum bands and you have to put more antenna elements in, that doesn't really make it a generational leap. And that could be what 6G is. So, I mean, you probably agree with him on that. If that's all it is, then
no. First of all, there won't be another CapEx cycle unless there's another revenue cycle.
Yeah.
That's always been true. And since no one knows where the revenue is, they're saying, why bother with the CapEx?
Yeah.
And that is circular and it is a doom loop. And so, frankly, it's not healthy for the industry if that's true.
Yeah.
So, you don't want to be right about that if you're taking that position, because your career is going to suck for the next 10 years. Okay? Second, despite innovation, whatever, there's always been a correlation between arguing for a G and arguing for more spectrum. And people have been doing that since the beginning of time, right?
Yeah.
Oh, we need a new technology. This is already consumed. I need more. And once you get more, you never give it back, all right?
Yeah.
So, and I have no problem with that because it's in their interest to go get more spectrum.
Do you think we need it, though?
I don't have a dog in that fight.
Well, Ericsson was talking about centimeter waves just before the show, which is around about 6 gigahertz bands and up. And, you know, I'm no expert, but I sort of apply the same skepticism I tend to apply to higher frequency spectrum, which is the poor propagation characteristics. You wouldn't use it unless you had to. And the reason you get so much bandwidth is because there's lots of it, precisely because it's not as useful as the lower frequency stuff. And I'm not convinced at the moment that we desperately need another step change of more mobile broadband bandwidth.
It's becoming available, though. You know, as you switch off 3G and then 2G may be around that. I think the UK said they want to switch 2G off by 2030, 2031 or something like that. So there will be spectrum that becomes available in those lower bands.
Which is useful, but that just
6G into.
Yeah, and that just further cements my point about my skepticism about needing the higher frequency spectrum.
But then the change is even less noticeable almost, because you're not even coming out with these new radio units that are sort of loaded with antenna elements. You're just doing it in the same way. So there might be some hardware changes in terms of the chip technology, and there's some software innovation, and there's more kind of AI in the RAN and those kinds of things we've been hearing about here. But to call it, if it is just sort of OFDM based and it doesn't introduce a kind of breakthrough different waveform, and there's nothing fundamentally different about the core, then I kind of agree with Bruno that it's kind of a bit wrong to regard it. I also think this whole 10-year cycle is itself under a bit of pressure.
Yeah.
Anyway, you know, you talk
too.
to Etsy at the moment, and they're quite worried about locking things down too soon, because they say things are changing so fast with AI at the moment.
And a few people have said that.
Yeah, that it's getting quite hard to. It doesn't really go a lot. Like the telecom industry is always complaining about moving too slowly and having this staggered approach. And okay, I can see the reasons why that happens, and you have to have industry coordination, but it's very much at odds with the way the hyperscalers kind of work. You know, that kind of fast innovation and fail.
Look at where the profits are.
Yeah,
the world's going to move towards faster innovation.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
So there's so much to unpack in what you just said, Ian, but one of the implicit things when you say the UK is looking to turn off 2G, the whole notion that you would have land that is, or spectrum as a resource, I think of it as like land if you're in the commercial construction business, that's committed to a technology until you blow it up, tear it down and build a new technology. It should be continuous innovation.
Yeah.
Just like the hyperscalers are, right?
Yeah.
So there shouldn't be any more like refarming 2G when the last person finally dies and gives their phone back, right? There should be Kubernetes containers that spin up, you know, and when it goes down to 8% market share, you just have fewer containers radiating on that technology.
Yeah.
And the technology of 800 megahertz isn't a GSM technology, it's 800 megahertz, which has no GSM left in 2030, but that was because the market left, not because the technology changed.
Yep.
Right, and that's an artifact of the way we used to do business, and it is changing very fast. One of the reasons we'll go to 6G is to move to a framework of continuous innovation that leverages a few things. We've been working on virtualization for 30 years. We've been working on software-defined radio for 30 years. We've been working on Open RAN for like 10 to 15 years. We're now going to open source architectures like what Tom's doing in Okudu.
Yeah.
So that's going to generate a world of continuous innovation that very much mimics the hyperscalers, but it has to honor the challenges in radio propagation.
Yeah.
And we think we're one of the gateways to that at Cohere.
We haven't talked at all about Okudu. That'd be one of my takeaways, I suppose, from
well,
the show.
give me a sec. I just got one question I want to ask Mike, and then I'll pass that to you. I just wondering, all this talk of 6G, Mike, from your point of view, have you heard people talking about it, and do you think they've done an adequate job of explaining why it's worth talking about at this early stage?
I'm looking at it from the perspective of what's going to happen and who's going to get pushed into what position. So what I'm pretty sure is going to happen is that the Olympics are going to roll around in 2028 in the US and LA. Operators are going to be pushed to offer something that is called 6G.
Which will be 5G, but they'll put a 6G
I assume it'll be
label on
running
it.
in 7 gigahertz, and the Ericsson test was 400 megahertz wide, which is quite a bit of spectrum.
Yeah.
Right. So they'll offer something in LA that they'll call 6G.
They've done that every generation. People started marketing HSPA as 4G.
So when that happens, it'll push everyone else. Well, what's your 6G strategy?
Yeah.
Oh, well, it's this, that, and the other. Well, oh, that's just rebranded 5G. So I think what's going to happen is that I'm not entirely sure what it will look like, but I think that operators are going to be pushed into launching something that looks like 6G, and I think probably early 6G will be a lot like 5G, and then they'll get pushed to make it better, and they'll want more spectrum in order to make it look different. So I think it's this sort of snowball that seems inevitable. And then I think I'm assuming all the AI technologies and whatever else is sort of going to be rolled up into that. But just from a having to react to the market, I don't think any operator is going to be able to, 5G is fine. I'm not convinced that is going to last too long. Given the momentum that we've seen at this show behind it, right? People are talking about it. We've got early systems. It is feeling more inevitable in my mind.
Yeah, and I think it's good to talk about it. I think that, kind of picking up on what Ian was saying, the problem that the industry's done in the past is the marketing people get hold of a new G, and they think that can be the sort of catalyst for all sorts of other commercial activity, and they overhype it. So unlike Americans to overhype things. Only joking.
True, though.
Well, maybe that stops with 6G.
Well, exactly. That's kind of what I'm leading up to.
Yeah.
I would advise them to
We inherited it from our British brethren back centuries ago.
But I could see marketing a sensing technology. Mm-hmm. This is what you can do with sensing. So the key finding example, or something exciting, something that excites Mike, because he didn't like the gloss keys thing.
I think we can do better than that.
We can do better than that. And then you can present it to a customer as, you can give it a fancy name, like Pulzone, and you can sort of go and brand that to customer, say that out and market it to customers. But I think just calling it 6G, I think that's that kind of the G. No, everybody that I meet on the consumer side who doesn't really know about telecom, they sort of go, so what is 5G?
Yeah.
And everybody's a bit sort of bemused. And
indeed, and if they overhype 6G, they're going to have that same problem. Yeah, I was just going to say, Ray, we need to get your mic more prominent. Yeah, it's just when you fold your coat back, you don't want to hide the microphone. There we are. People are seeing. Nah,
there we go.
People are seeing how the sausage is made.
There you go.
So as I promised to pass it to you, Ian. I mean, Ray made a mention to Tom, and I should give him a shout out. I presume you're referring to Tom Rondeau, yeah?
Yeah, correct.
And he was on the pod that. Well, he was on the preliminary audio-only bit that we did with you in Dublin, which we did it from a pub.
We refer to him as FTR, by the way.
Say that again?
We refer to him as FTR, by the way.
FTR.
So you know Tom Rondeau, but you have to decide for yourself what the F stands for.
Right.
Okay.
Okay. I will speculate.
Okay.
And not to be confused with FDR.
That's correct.
Yeah.
Completely new generation.
Right. But yes, and we bumped into him. Thanks a lot. You hosted some drinks on Sunday, and we came and chatted, and we bumped into Tom there. And as you said, Ian, you wrote a piece at the start of the show about this Okudu. Why don't you just quickly frame it for the audience?
Yeah, so I spoke to him a few days before the show started on it, and Tom Rondeau leads a program at the. Ray can jump in and correct me if I get any of this wrong, because you know it better than I do. But he leads a program for the Department of Defence called Future G, isn't
Correct.
it? Future G.
I'm pleased you call it Department of Defence as well.
Oh yeah, or Department, whatever you want to call it. The Department of War's the one
Trump wants to call it Department of War, but some people think that's a bit harsh.
And so he's a PhD. He's like really in the weeds with all this stuff, the signal processing stuff and radio technologies, and looking at the way they could be.
And he cheats in exams by tattooing the formulas onto his forearms.
Yeah.
No, he doesn't cheat in exams, but Tom has got mathematical formulas.
He's got tattooed algorithms over his body. Yeah.
Yeah.
And they're looking at like new waveforms. They're looking at innovations in the Gs, as the name of the program implies, that could have military purposes. But some of this stuff's also relevant on the civilian side. And they've kind of teamed up with the Linux Foundation, which is very well-known open source, probably the world's best-known open source group. And they're pushing this program called Okudu, OCUDU, which is Open Centralized Unit Distributed Unit. So the idea is it's kind of an evolution of the Open RAN idea. Open RAN sort of opened up the interfaces between different parts of the RAN, but the baseband itself was still kind of, closed down. It's very hard for it. The way he described it, it's very hard for developers from outside the kind of Ericsson, Nokia, Samsung, forget about Huawei, because it's obviously not really going to involve the Chinese, but anybody outside the kind of big three, if you like, to kind of come along and innovate and introduce cleverer algorithms into the mix, if you like, and open source. The idea of building a reference platform with open source technology would hopefully speed that along.
And
that's the kind of basic
and it's being
premise.
framed as quite a sort of US-driven thing, isn't it? I remember reading one press release, and I think it was an Ericsson press release, but they were talking about the US winning the 6G race, which I thought was slightly weird framing. But then again, with all due respect to your president, he does like to use sort of absolute concepts like winning races and all that sort of thing. But it does feel like some parts of the US government think this might be an opportunity for the US to have a bigger piece of the action.
Yeah, but it does have players in it. I mean, obviously Nokia and Ericsson aren't US. No. They have a very big presence in the US.
SoftBank's in there too.
SoftBank's in there. I think Samsung's in there. I'm not quite sure about that, but I think Samsung's in there. They're certainly talking to them about it. And I think you've got some of the telcos kind of involved in having a look at it. The question is, I asked Tom the question, why would Ericsson and Nokia, who don't have the best reputation for openness and haven't really sort of wanted to work certainly with open source, that seems like a real risk to their sort of business models even. Why would they want to do this? And I thought he had a brilliant answer, which is, well, they want to work with the Department of War. And you look at beyond that, they make a lot of their profits in the US. They don't make a lot of their profits in other parts of the world.
So let me, if I could comment on that. First of all, I think you got Tom's vision exactly right, and I think you've framed the implications for our industry of that vision exactly right. So I'm glad that he got that point across in your interview and article. I don't know that it's fair. We certainly have experience banging our head against the wall trying to enter a closed category. So there's vendors that are notoriously closed, but they're opening. Very quickly. We are collaborating with one of the best vendors in the world, and I will say, without mentioning names, I give them a tremendous amount of credit for being as collaborative as they are, or we wouldn't be successful in our partnership. And in this event, we've taken our relationships with all of the vendors you cited to new heights of openness. Now, it's crawl, walk, run, and so we've gone from closed to modestly open. Some people are moving slower for practical reasons, like they want to make sure they're secure, they want to make sure they understand business model alignment, but people are opening, and I believe that's true, and I'm happy to go on the record saying that. And that is absolutely essential for companies like us, because we wouldn't be successful if we required operators to rip and replace hundreds of billions of dollars worth of equipment just to get some incremental innovation, right? So we think we bring significant innovation, but there's no innovation big enough that I'm aware of that's worth ripping and replacing hundreds of billions of dollars of equipment. It's just inefficient for everyone. Right. So collaboration is absolutely necessary. And what Tom did was he said, look, of course this is about the US, but the US is also putting the money in it. So if you put the money up, you have a voice, right? So, but we're absolutely going to share that with our allies to the extent that folks are aligned with those objectives, and most are. Right? So it is very similar to the way open source influenced other innovation like the internet. And I think we're thrilled that it's there, because it's going to force folks to declare whether or not they're committed to open or not. Whereas before, when you announced Open RAN, and people could be both on the fence and not. And this is sort of like get in or don't get in. So I give them a lot of credit. I'm not sure everyone that has signed up will get fully in, but that's up to them. They'll have to decide. We're all in on that.
The other big company, obviously, that's in it that we didn't mention is NVIDIA. Who I think is almost one of the themes of this event. But there's some very small, interesting players. I met the guys from DeepSig, who actually worked on the part of the reference platform, and there's another company called SRS, which is Irish. I didn't get to meet them, but I met Jim Shea, isn't it? He's the CEO, and I think the CTO is Tim O'Shea. So they're all called Tim or Jim if they work for DeepSig, basically.
And some variety of Shea.
No, those are
they're really interesting guys.
Those are important anchor tenants. They've already been announced as awardees, and they're driving the beginning of the framework of the architecture, and there'll be more announcements, we hope, over time.
Cool.
So NVIDIA would be one of my themes, I think, of the event. The sort of how they fit into the AI RAM picture, and they've sort of kind of come along and taken quite a big stake in telecom.
It was actually when we were in Dublin with Ray where the NVIDIA investment in Nokia was announced. It was that week, wasn't it?
I think it might have been just before that.
It was just before. It was during GTC DC, which was, if I'm not mistaken, it was the end of October.
And it's it's pretty hard to not assume that NVIDIA, and I know your point is it's not just about Nokia, but in the case of Nokia, it's pretty hard to assume that Nokia's a lot of Nokia's strategy is now going to be very heavily influenced by NVIDIA, which could be good. And NVIDIA is obviously the biggest company in the world right now, incredibly powerful, incredibly important, very resourceful. But it still feels like a little bit of a Faustian pact to me. They're basically, I mean, do they have the option of, like, if NVIDIA goes, we need to, we want you to do more of this, can they just say no?
Well, it's a bit of a gap. I mean, they're very much all in with NVIDIA for sure.
Yeah.
But then, Ericsson's,
I think that was my headline back when it was announced.
Ericsson's strategy is very much based around Intel on the kind of silicon side. So the pushback could come in the same way. I think there's a concern about what are the best compute platforms to use, I suppose, for the RAN and for this kind of idea of co-hosting workloads, perhaps on co-hosting RAN compute and sort of, more standard AI applications on the same infrastructure. It kind of remains to be seen. People are a bit skeptical of the NVIDIA story because they have a reputation for being big, powerful, expensive chips, and maybe they don't have a place in the RAM. But the technology is evolving and price points are changing. And
well, I thought it was telling that on the Sunday thing that we all went to, that Hotard made a preemptive point of saying, this isn't about just whacking a GPU into the cell site and then finding a use for a lot of that compute capacity. He'd sort of anticipated that objection. He's probably heard it a million times.
Yeah, so he's talking about Arc Pro, which is the card that you put into an AirScale chassis. So from what I understand, you can't just take one of their big old, the sort of things that you put in a data center that hyperscalers running. And if you put it in that AirScale chassis, it would sort of kind of melt it. So they've had to come up with a form factor that allows you, it's like a sort of scaled down GPU. You get GPUs in computers and other, they're not just these things that go into huge data centers and that are used for training purposes. So the idea is to come up with a kind of a RAN suitable GPU that you could use in AirScale. Then you've got ones that are more powerful that might be used with, the kind of in a server. When you're moving towards a more like a sort of vRAN model, I guess.
So do you think there's a real sort of schism between Nokia's view of the sort of stuff that you're describing and Ericsson's? Is there a real fork in their philosophies?
I mean, Ericsson's still very much working on the kind of CPU architecture, when they talk about vRAN, and they're still very committed to their custom silicon as well. So they have kind of a two-track approach where they're using purpose-built silicon and they're pushing that as an option for AI RAN as well. And then they're moving down the virtual RAN route, mainly with Intel, but they're trying to have software that they can port to other kind of hardware platforms, but they'd all be CPU based. So their way of deploying on NVIDIA is quite different from what Nokia is talking about. I think there's been a bit of confusion about that, but they would only they're basically putting the whole of they're basically putting the whole of layer 1 on Granite Rapids, which is Intel's latest sort of CPU, except for one function that gets accelerated. And then if you move it onto an NVIDIA chip, what they'd use is Grace, which is their ARM-based CPU for layer 1, and the GPU would only be used for sort of that FEC acceleration. So it's rather than using putting the whole of layer 1 on it. So they're quite different approaches that they've taken to doing it.
But it is confusing, and I got to give credit where it's due. I obviously know you better than I know other telecoms journalists, but I think you're definitely the one who's the most on top of all of that stuff. And you've explained it to me countless times, and sometimes it just won't stay in my head. It's just a bit arcane, and it won't stay there. So good for you. I was gonna just slightly go on from it. Actually, before I forget, I should explain why me and Ian are wearing these little things. We bumped into a fan of the pod. It's the second year running I've met up with him, called Alexander Ilivanov, I think, and he's from Bulgaria, and this is a Bulgarian thing, and he sent me a little link. I won't read it all, but it's symbolic of the founding of Bulgaria. So if you're wondering why me and Ian are suddenly taken to wearing friendship bracelets like teenage girls, that's the reason. Anyway, I just wanted to give Alexander a shout out for that. But I was going to ask you, how long have you been at Ookla?
Like 7-8 months now.
Right, and then prior to that, you were very much you were very much covering the mobile space, weren't you?
For sure.
As the areas that that you have to focus on? Have they changed a lot between then and now, or are you still sort of following similar trends?
I mean, I'm still trying to follow what is interesting, and, like what's cool, and certainly, satellites, that's interesting. We've got data on, get to write about fixed wireless and sort of all the same kind of stuff. I mean, there's only so many things that are interesting in this industry at any one time, and so hopefully I can touch on a couple of them, at least with the data that we've got.
Right. Yeah, and it's probably a good opportunity to. I mean, we've had people from Ookla on before. In fact, last year at the show we had Mark Giles on, obviously we were joking about this acquisition. I still afterwards, when you're not worried about putting your foot in it, I'd be interested to know what the rationale is there. But a lot of people know about Ookla because of the speed test app.
Right.
But it does a lot more than that.
Yeah, there's more than that.
Yeah.
I've gotten a crash course in the Ookla of it all, and so it's several different things. It's certainly speed test and all the data that's collected through that app. But in addition to that, it's Down Detector is also part of Ookla, and that is sort of crowdsourced outage information, real time. That
always gets in the headlines when some AWS crash happens or something like that.
When something goes down, which is actually, it's not uncommon for stuff to go down. And then there's also Root Metrics, which is scientific drive testing, and that is where we've done a lot more looking at that data within the analyst team, and that is fantastic because that data is excellent. There's just a lot of really interesting insights to derive from that Root Metrics data.
My understanding is one of the purposes of the speed test is that it's obviously a free app and people can use it, but presumably when they use it, they're volunteering some data to Ookla for then you to go and obsess over and form conclusions from.
And all this data, and so the other one is Ekahau, which is Wi-Fi network management. So there's a little bit of data there, and all that stuff goes into our data lake, and I get to swim around in it. And just see what's in there, and you can do sort of interesting correlations about what you're seeing and what's going on and what is related to the other thing, and so it's pretty interesting.
And how are you? I mean, obviously, you're going to say it's great, but how are you finding the different sort of professional lifestyle of being an analyst versus a journalist? I
got to say, the pace is slower.
Yeah.
I mean, you guys, right, working every day. Probably, how many stories have you posted today alone?
Well, Ian worked up a storm. He'd written a bunch of stuff in advance. He put up 4 stories on the morning of Mobile World Congress.
I know. I read all of them. They're really good. Yeah. So So I'm not doing that. I'm actually getting much more used to the pace of this analyst.
You seem to like it.
It's okay. Yeah. It's actually, I was going to say, like, it's especially coming to this show. It's hard to slow down.
Yeah.
It's much more normal to have something to post in the afternoon, right? That you've finished.
It's interesting. I think being a journalist is quite a good personality fit for me because I've got a really crappy attention span. And a really low boredom threshold. So having lots of different things that I've got to deal with all at once actually kind of suits me. And I'm not so good at the sort of deeper dive stuff. I mean, even the length of writing that Ian does would test my attention span, the depth that you go into. So and being the editor, I sort of have to do all sorts of other stuff, and I do commercial work while I'm here and all that sort of thing. And I quite like having to juggle lots of different balls, but not go too deep on any one thing. So that's interesting. And Ray, go back to Cohere. Any sort of major developments since we last spoke? What was it? 6 months ago? A bit less?
Yeah, a bit less, I guess. Well, first, earlier this year, in January, we went live in a commercial network, albeit at small scale. But the transformation is incredible. It's so profound when you're actually working with live traffic. You're dealing with all the nuances of diverse applications, traffic being bursty, peaking, crowding, all kinds of things, and collaborating with a world-class operator or a world-class RAN vendor. It's awesome. It's what's required in order to take the finishing touches on our product and figure out exactly what its performance looks like, which will derive pricing, and what its reliability is. So that's number one. 2, as we're doing that, the data that we're collecting in order to drive better system performance is incredible. We're literally doing an MRI on the the cellular network. We're seeing all of the data at a TTI level, which means instantaneous, real-time level of what's going on inside the cellular network. And the extraction of that data into a framework of KPIs is what's driving AI RAN. So we're having a lot of AI discussions based on what we see, because we can actually show people now what we see, as opposed to talking about AI.
Yeah.
Okay.
So when you talk about training models, you train models with data, we've got the data, which is awesome, okay? And then we also, when people say, how did you do that? Well, we said, well, we sense the channel before we transmit it. That's how we know how to do it. They're like, oh, so you guys do sensing? And you go, oh yeah, it's like,
I'm so pleased you asked.
oh, so I'm so pleased. So this whole integrated sensing and communication, do you guys do that? It's like, well, we sense before we communicated. We do this together in one package. I think that's integrated sensing and communication.
Yeah.
So we've now, I would say we have one of the largest voices in the industry right now with regard to where ISAC is going and what its relevance is. Its relevance is for the creation of a better RAN experience, but it's also for the creation of a service layer. Like, so, yeah, where are my keys? That's one thing. And it is, glad to know that you'd pay £1 for that a month. That's great. All we need is a couple of billion people to pay £1 a month, and it's a great product.
Yeah.
But also, think of sensing as not only knowing where everything is, but it's the first detection of whether the state of it changes. So what you really value is not just that there's a Ring doorbell on your front porch, but you get an alert that says there's someone on your front porch.
Yeah.
It's the change of state of the sensor that most often creates the value, right? Oh, by the way, you had a pipe burst, or oh, by the way, your thermostat's off, or oh, it's oh, by the way, your kid didn't get picked up from school, or oh, by the way, something just changed in this environment. We don't yet understand how profound that is for both consumer and enterprise opportunity. So that's why I want to go back to, I think the 6G opportunity with sensing is massive, and if it's massive, it'll drive CapEx.
Yeah.
And so, and I want to go back a little bit to this whole like NVIDIA versus, Nokia versus Ericsson confusion. Look, this is an industry that's been starved of capital since the revenue growth stopped, okay, which is many years. If you just aggregate the R&D capacity of the leaders in our industry, it's been declining for 5 years.
Yeah.
So people talk about that relative to China, which is a geopolitical risk, but just at a fundamental level, that's unhealthy for our industry. So instead of looking at this with such a cynical mindset, what's wrong with people bringing capital into the industry? NVIDIA injecting $1 billion or $2 billion or $3 billion into the industry is massively good for the industry. Okudu putting $500 million into the industry. Oh, are they going to exercise U.S. national interest by giving U.S. taxpayer dollars to the industry? Yeah. Is NVIDIA going to ask for some level of influence on the outcome of the architecture that they're funding? Of course they are. When's the last time someone just gave you free money? But I don't think it's undue influence. I don't think the notion of like going so far as to say that it's like mischievous is in any way.
No, I think that's really good pushback. I mean, I would say from my point of view, it's still the question that needs to be asked. But then we ask these questions because we're challenging people to give us good answers, and you just gave a good answer. But these questions still need to be asked, and as you say, there's no such thing as a free lunch.
Right.
But that doesn't mean just because you are in some degree of financial partnership with someone else, that doesn't mean it can't be mutually beneficial.
No, it's not a mercenary thing. It's just, but there is a certain amount of capitalism in it, right? That says I'm injecting a significant amount of capital, and I'd like to have an influence on the outcome. Yeah. Now, I'll give you another example where everyone thought that's exactly what was going to happen when Apple was on the ropes and Microsoft invested $500 million in Apple, and everyone looked at that cynically. And you look at what that enabled, Apple didn't become Microsoft's bitch, okay? That was the headline that guys like you wrote. It's like, oh my God, Apple is sold their soul to Microsoft. No, Apple.
That's probably Scott's headline.
Apple used that capital. They resurrected the notion of a vertically integrated stack and created a consumer electronics company on top of it, and became one of the most valuable, if not the most valuable company in the world. So let's leave some room for innovation, even for the Nokias and the Ericssons and everyone of the world to come in and say, look, what I really need is a collaborative sponsor that's willing to help us in the journey of innovation, and let's just let the chips fall where they may.
Yeah. That's all totally fair enough. We're going to, in a few minutes, we're going to do a bit of super subbing. And we got, like I said at the start, we're so immensely popular that we've got 2 more guests that want to come on. So I'm going to start sort of wrapping up this first segment of the pod. I guess just any last thoughts, maybe to you first, Mike. Any other last reflections on the show or on the industry from this year?
I mean, lots of stuff going on. I did have a look at one of the dancing robots.
Yes.
Which I'm very skeptical on all robot related, robots are going to take over or whatever. But I mean, it was dancing, like it did literally dance around and stuff.
Yeah.
And so like
The one on the honor stand.
Was that the one doing the
couple
Michael
of them.
Jackson moves?
Yeah, it was like
Yeah.
it was like karate moves and stuff.
Oh,
and it like
karate
did
moves.
a jump and stuff. And so like I'm really struggling with the idea that anyone is going to want a robot, or that any of the robots that I've seen can actually do anything.
But a dancing robot.
Yeah, I mean, it literally dances. However, I'm assuming that all the work that's gone into all these booths to assemble them over the last several weeks, I can almost guarantee that there were no robots used in the creation of any of the stuff here, and they're just on display only. But maybe next year we'll get to the point where robots might actually be useful for stuff that's not dancing. I don't know, we'll see.
Did you get that? I noticed, and we spoke about it, I think, in our first podcast of the year. I noticed that physical AI was a big buzzword at CES this year.
Yeah.
And physical AI basically means AI for the physical environment, i.e. robots and automated.
Yeah, kind
bits
of why I
and
bring it
bobs.
up. And wearables
Seen John
too.
Strand walk into the media centre there. There he is, having one of his Karma phone conversations. And I remember I mentioned it to Ian, and he was deeply skeptical. But I can see, and in the context of some of the stuff Ray was talking about with ISAC and that sort of thing, I can see some form of sort of autonomous gadget, be it a robot or a vehicle or a drone or whatever, becoming more ubiquitous over time.
I'm not sure about robots yet, but I know that AI is incredible. Like just in the past few months alone, like all the stuff that I was taking it and I was taking a picture of the booth and then asking AI to explain to me what is in this booth, and it would do it like practically exactly and give me all sorts of details. Like this is some amazing stuff that's out there.
By the way, I've got to give a shout out to Ronnie, who's in the background there, Ray's colleague. He sent me a little message. It'd be rude not to represent it. That Cohere was nominated for a GLOMO Best Mobile Technology Breakthrough. So congratulations and best of luck on winning that. You were also nominated for an even more important award, which is our awards.
Yes, we appreciate that too,
And Ronnie,
Scott.
you also put a photo of this very thing up on LinkedIn, so people want to see how it's happening. So I'll get you. I'll give you an opportunity as well, Ian. Any other last thoughts about the show and what the prevalent themes have been?
Without pushing back too hard on your premise and your skepticism, which frankly I think is healthy to provoke these discussions. I really respect it. But in the general pushback, I'll just say I think this was a profoundly different Mobile World Congress, and I've been in the industry 40 years now.
Right. Well, that's
right.
That's
And
noteworthy.
I think it's profoundly different because I think people are sensing, no pun intended, an opportunity for new revenue. And we are.
Right.
Look, the mobile industry converges the need for people to move and stay connected. Right, that's all we exist for the purposes of allowing people to stay connected while they move.
Yep.
Right, and sensing is entering our vernacular. We've all got doorbells that sense, and we've got things that sense. As that layer is added, right, and some of it will be justified by defense-based drone swarms and things like that, right, and it'll be seeded. The capital will be seeded for that. I believe we're going to be sitting here next year with a profoundly different perception of where the world is. And I just go back to 3G spent years in this place, and LTE happened at lightning speed when someone opened the entire internet to a computer. Now they called it a phone, but it's a computer. So if we can get our heads around sensing being relevant, I think we're going to be, for the next 10 years of MWC, are going to be far more different than the last 10 have been.
Yeah, well, I look forward to that. I do get the impression, as you said, I've expressed some skepticism about this early talk of 6G, and I'll still stand by my critique of marketing people overhyping these things. But I really welcome if what you say, and I've got no reason to doubt you. I really welcome if it really is a sort of paradigm shift. Whereas 5G just felt, in hindsight, it just felt like more mobile broadband.
It was designed to be nothing new.
Right. Okay. So
and frankly, unless we get our heads around it. 6G last year was going down the path that says, please don't do anything new. I don't have any capital.
Yeah.
And it's like, well, how are you going to get revenue?
Yeah.
And it's like, well, that's why I don't have any capital. And we were in a circle jerk that was not going to end well, okay? And I think we've broken out of it now, driven by the focus on ISAC. If we're wrong, we're wrong. But I'm going on the record now so we can look back on this next year when we're all together.
Well, there's at least one other company recently that Ian and I have hung out with are going big on ISAC, and that's InterDigital.
Yeah, although they have a different flavour
view
of it.
Yeah. You wrote that up, didn't you? Mm-hmm. Did you write up the Cohere angle in your story?
Sure.
Yeah. You presumably would have seen that.
I might have seen it.
Yeah.
I mean, everybody's got their own views about things, so...
Yeah. And what about you, Ian? Before we have a little break to swap out our guests, any last thought? I mean, AI RAN, we've spoken about that a few times. Ray's mentioned it a few times. Do you think it justifies the amount of time that's being spent talking about it?
There's a bit of jumping on the bandwagon with it, I think, that, we've seen a lot of talk about AI generally in the wider world since late 2022 when the transformer sort of model got turned into ChatGPT. So I think there's a bit of that going on, because I think AI and machine learning have actually been used for making improvements in the RAN for quite a long time. To companies like Marvell, and they've been doing work with Nokia for ages in that sort of area, and Intel has been doing that kind of thing with AMX and some of the tools that it has in its CPUs. So I'm not sure that it's as new as it sounds. I think the idea of using AI, like the sort of AI with RAN or AI and RAN, where you're kind of putting inferencing at the edge and using those GPUs not just for RAN compute, but to do other sort of more mainstream AI applications, and maybe there's some whizzy robotics angle or some smart glasses or real life translations that needs that. I don't know. I mean that kind of remains to be seen. I think it'd be great if it happened, because it's like things like that are an opportunity for the industry, I guess, potentially, but there's quite a bit of skepticism among the telco community that you'd actually need to put the resources right at the cell edge or even near to them. So
because one of the biggest justifications for having
it's latency based, really.
Latency,
so
but
remains to be seen.
But I think you were telling me, I can't remember whether it was on or off the record, so I won't say who you were talking about.
I'll say, because it was on the record.
Oh, okay, go on.
I mean, the people I've spoken to both Iago Tenorio at Verizon, and he's quite a skeptic of that. He said you could do it from the sort of data centers you're using for your core network functions.
Right.
And the other person who said it to me today was Greg McCall. And I mean, the thing about the UK is it's a much smaller market.
He's CTO of BT.
The first thing he says, the UK is not actually that big. You don't need that many facilities to do quite low latency stuff. The idea that you'd have thousands of nodes with GPUs in, I think he thinks is a bit far-fetched.
Right.
But he did say, like, we're not sort of ruling anything. You don't know how this stuff's going to evolve. So who knows? Something could come along. But at the moment, it's kind of hard to see.
We should give a shout out to BT. They entertained us last night. They're great. All their whole senior leadership team, including the CEO Alison Kirkby, came out to a bar and restaurant, and we had a chat with them.
Yep.
And I always really appreciate it when these big companies make their senior execs available, and slightly smaller companies.
Thank you. Soon to be big companies, we all have aspirations.
And on the same note, we should give a shout out to Orange, who we had dinner with on Monday night. And they had their whole senior leadership team there, and a little bit of Mobile World Congress gossip. Telefonica started doing a dinner on Monday nights as well. So now we've got Orange and Telefonica in direct competition for media dinners on the Monday night.
Yes.
So yes, just wanted to acknowledge that. Well, look, guys, I think we'll need to wrap it up there. Thank you very much. Great to see you again, both
Always
of you.
Good to see you. Nice to be with you.
That's the other thing I love about Mobile World Congress is just the social side of it. We all just meet up. You live in Denver. I live in Hertfordshire. It's one of the few times we're ever likely to bump into each other, so I really enjoy it. I can remember some times past when a bunch of light reading were there. I think last time I saw Phil Harvey was at Mobile World Congress. Yeah. So that's a really cool part of this show. So I really enjoy that. So thanks again, guys. I'll let you get on with the rest of your show.
Pleasure.
And hope to see you both soon.
Okay, same here.
Thanks.
It's been a pleasure.
Let me take this opportunity to once more thank the sponsors of this podcast, Cohere Technologies. which is the innovator behind the Universal Spectrum Multiplier software for 4G and 5G, and Pulsone technology for 5G and 6G coexistence, ISAC and NTN. Nice one. And now we're back, and you may have noticed if you're watching this on video that we got 2 new guests. We got returning guests here, Danielle Rios. You were at this very same podcast last year.
I was.
And Dan, I think you've been on the pod years and years ago when I wasn't there.
Yeah.
So this is Dan Warren. Danielle she used to be acting CEO of Totogi, now
like
she's not acting anymore. That was just a little joke because we wound you up about it last time you came on the pod.
Yeah.
And Dan, actually, before I go any further, I'm not going to try and frame you because you're sort of between things at the moment, is that right?
Yeah, so I left Samsung 7 weeks ago.
Right.
2 weeks' time, I'll be Chief Innovation Officer at UK Telecoms Labs.
Cool.
Which
Congratulations.
is a government agency doing deep penetration testing stuff.
Cool.
I'm visiting professor at University of Bristol. I'm CEO and founder of a startup called Verticular that's doing GPU optimization.
Sweet.
And I do a bit of consultancy.
Yeah. Awesome. Busy guy.
Yeah, and then the rest of the time I'm gardening and walking the dog.
Yeah. What does a visiting
You just described your whole life.
What does a visiting
It's like an
professor
acting
do?
CEO.
Yeah, exactly. I'm obsessed with these qualifying terms.
Yeah, we visit. So it's more of an honorific position.
Oh, I see.
So I did a lot of stuff with,
I love it.
I did a lot of stuff with University of Bristol when I was still at Samsung, and then that kind of pivoted into helping some of their undergraduates and postgraduates with transition into industry. And they said, "Yeah, you're doing good stuff. Would you like a visiting professorship?" And I went, "Okay."
Yeah, I mean, I get those offers all the time.
Yeah, I know.
That's all I can do is just go around visiting places now.
Yeah, that's great. Yeah.
Before I go any further, Danielle, we've called you before on the podcast the Queen of Props, and you
Yes.
seem to have a bit of a glint in your eye right now. Should we?
Well, last time I came on to this pod at MWC, we did a bar cart
Yes.
with some
That was
old fashions.
cool. Yeah.
And when
I still remember it fondly.
and they were delicious, but there was a little bit of hesitation and trepidation I could tell when you took your first sips.
Yeah.
That you mentioned when I was on the pod in October. You said there was, rough nights, long nights. And I was like, the mom and me, very concerned for your health and recovery. What's
Thank
the
you.
best,
Untouched.
the best hangover cure? And so what I can recommend is what I do when I'm hungover,
Yeah.
which is shots.
Ooh.
And these are Jello shots or jelly
wow.
shots.
Wow.
The
I'm gonna have to take a photo of this.
the short stack is kava and gold flakes. I will call that one Pierre's hard stop. Because he always has a hard stop and ends our podcast when we're talking.
Right.
And then the taller one is 3 layers of lemon, gin, and blackberry. And the top one is, I think, kava. And since it has 3 layers, I was going with the AI 3-way. But
I'm gonna have to hold these up to the camera.
but they're
So here's
they're
one.
gourmet jelly shots, alcoholic.
Gourmet jelly shot. So this one's kava flavour, is it?
It's kava and with gold flakes that are edible.
What do I do? Just grab it
I think
and-
you just
and
grab
just-
it and do it.
Shall I just get involved?
Yeah.
I'm so glad I'm on with you.
Yeah, it's super
This is much better than
Good?
just getting a beer. Is it good?
delicious. Grab
Yeah,
one.
it tastes like
The big one.
Doesn't taste like it's got
Do you
booze
want
in it.
I would like the tall
That's
one.
dangerous.
Yeah.
It tastes like normal kids jelly.
Yeah,
do,
dangerous. We can just do a whole bunch. I have
You can have that
72.
one.
So
72.
You got something to do with these?
I do.
Oh my God!
That's 12, right? I think I have 72.
What are you doing with the other? What are you doing with the
Yeah.
other 60?
I might pass them out in VIP.
I'm not sure it's going to be Pierre's hard stop. It's going to be
you
Dan's
wouldn't
hard
think
stop
it's
when he pulls up.
alcoholic.
I know. We
very
can have,
dangerous.
We can have 72 of them.
It's
I've got to try the purple one
It's
now
like
as well.
putting cannabis in your cake.
Yeah, it's yummy. Mm.
Oh man.
You having more?
Yeah, oh yeah, no, absolutely. I mean, I'm just slightly concerned about the new
super
job
good.
actually starting in 2 weeks. It's either be that I'm going to get fired before I've even started, or it's going to be that I won't have woken
Yeah.
up.
Well, we tried to get our previous guest Mike Dano fired by asking him about Accenture buying Ookla,
Yeah.
but he very expertly just kept silent when we asked him about it. Well, that's very cool.
Yeah.
Once more,
Fun times.
the problem is, Danielle, you've set such a high bar for yourself that you've got to deliver something exceptional each time.
I keep raising it.
Yeah.
And you can't keep doing the same thing, right? So I was like, oh, what are we going to do next? And I was like, Jell-O shots. They were complaining about, well, I was like, hangover food or hangover, a smoothie. But I thought the orthogonal diversion with the shots would be really awesome.
It'd be interesting to see if they are quite alcoholic, and then in about 10 minutes we're all shit-faced. So we'll see.
They're
how that
edibles,
goes.
actually. No, I'm kidding.
Okay, well,
That would be super uncool.
Now that we're all nice and relaxed, I just want to, I'll start with you, Danielle, as we're chatting. It's the obvious question, same as I asked our previous two guests. Just frame the show this year. What have you been chatting about? What are the big takeaways for you?
I mean, I've been talking about AI all week, right? What was really interesting is that I don't think that there was a lot of 6G chatter, and there was a little bit of a question if it would come up this year. I'm sure Ericsson and Nokia and Huawei are kind of sad about that because that's how they make all their money. But I think there was a lot of chatter about satellites, right?
Yeah,
we heard a lot of direct-to-device. Starlink was here. Gwen Shotwell is this amazing woman that runs SpaceX, and then a lot of just partnerships, not just with Starlink, but also with like AST. I think Vodafone has that partnership. So just the satellite piece, and I think AI, agentic AI, more specifically, was everywhere, right?
I think that was the theme of the show, really.
Yeah.
Probably the overarching theme. I agree. I didn't hear much about 6G.
Yeah.
Other than, I mean, Scott was right. Nokia were making a bit of a big deal about it because the CEO said a couple of specific things. But even Ericsson, and I don't know about Huawei, I haven't been over there, but Ericsson wasn't really pushing it. And Samsung's network CEO, Woo-Jin Kim, was really downplaying it earlier on today in a meeting he had with the press. Yeah, he was describing it very much as a sort of like an evolution, really, of the same way that Ericsson's kind of talked about it in the past.
Well, but that's okay, because I mean, one of his previous research staff was describing it that way internally as well.
Yes, fancy that.
And I mean, well, that I was quite heavily on the record that I was very sceptical about 5G, particularly around the business case for 5G.
Yeah.
And the paper that I wrote when I was at GSMA, there's not much of it that turned out to be wrong 10 years down the line.
Yeah.
And if you look at even the research agencies, people like SNSJU for European research, when I was still in there, I was doing presentations on their 6G roadmap for the research side, and it was almost cut and paste 5G, and just you could have crossed it out. Same use cases, very similar in terms of.
Well, we had a triangle for 5G and we got a hexagon for 6G.
Yeah, that's the big difference.
That's all it's good for, is producing these shapes.
Producing new shapes.
For slide
well, maybe
shows.
7G should be a Jell-O shot. It would be like a cube. But I think the NTN thing is possibly the one thing in 6G which actually has legs. Yeah. Because it's actually solving a problem, right?
Yeah. Well, ISAC's the other one that gets discussed a bit. We've just had a big pitch from an ISAC person.
Yeah, from Cohere,
Cohere, obviously.
But I struggle with ISAC on the basis of you have a choice, right? And we can go very deep and technical on it. So you either stick with OFDM as a waveform, in which case you have to slice and dice the frequency you've got at the moment. Yeah. And that's the route that it looks like ISAC will go in 3GPP standardization, at least in the first instance. Yep. Or you go QTFS or some other new waveform, which means that all the research you did in 4G and 5G goes out the window. It means that you probably really piss off Qualcomm. Yeah. And you go to something which is actually designed to have radar capability and communications in place at the same time, but then you've got to reprove everything, including the security for it. And so I kind of buy into a bit of a problem. Once you get to use cases, you need a really big chunk of bandwidth, right? And 2x20 doesn't get you that much fidelity. So you've got to go higher in the spectrum, which means you've got to go shorter distances.
So you need a lot of equipment to be able to do it.
You need a lot of equipment, costs a lot of money, and you've got to go to get really good fidelity for some of the kind of health applications that people are talking about. You're really looking at Wi-Fi first at 60 gigahertz or 300 gigahertz, which means that it goes kind of to about that chair. Yeah. And then that means you need RIS. And RIS is another thing which was in 6G originally.
Reflective surface stuff.
Reflective intelligent services, and that's been kind of worked out of the first round of stuff too. So I struggle with ISAC a bit.
Good pushback.
Yeah.
So you've obviously thought about this, Dan.
Just a little bit.
Yeah. I think about things. when I'm not doing these.
When you're not visiting, you're thinking.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah.
Danielle, so 6G's come up more than I thought it would at the show. Just this stage in the cycle, and as we just alluded to, the very concept of the cycle is something that's, I think, a little bit contentious by itself, but that's a slightly different matter. Have you had many sort of 6G chats? Do you think we're talking about it too early?
I have 0 6G chats.
Right.
You know, just being a software vendor, I heard 0.
I don't think there's been much talk about 6G.
Well,
there was in the press releases,
yeah.
but you're right, on the floor. When I've proposed that question, there were lots of press releases about it, but then when I've asked people on the floor, they go, no, it's not come up, and so you've just...
I mean, not
You're
one
not the person
person
who said
raised it.
But I think the press releases are probably talking about, oh, we need to sort of think about a system that supports AI, like kind of Nokia framing of it, which there's nothing wrong with 5G for supporting AI stuff, because it's, you know...
You don't need 6G
I
for
don't
that,
really...
yeah.
I think they're trying to sort of... They're sort of jumping on the AI bandwagon, really, and trying to make 6G sound more exciting than it is by attaching it to AI.
there's a lot of AI wash.
There is a lot of AI wash, and I think, you know, I go along with the view, like you were saying, is it going to be OFDM based, and it seems like it probably is in the 3GPP standards. Is it going to be the core network's not going to have the same kind of change that we saw going on with 4G to 5G, where you were going from, you know, from virtualization to the use of containers and this sort of thing. That's kind of, there's not something comparable that's going to happen in 6G. So I don't really see what's other than moving up into higher spectrum bands. I don't really see what 6G is that's new.
But I mean, even the moving up into higher spectrum bands, you know, if you go into kind of upper 6 or you go into USFR3 bands, then you start to run into some of the problems that really blocked 26, 28, 39 gigahertz from happening, because you run into that range issue. And then on the core network side, the problem with the 5G core network, the SBA-based 5G core network, is that they kind of almost got to the point of doing it softwareized properly. If you take it one step further, if you properly just blow it all up and fragment it down to microservices, then you can do some really interesting stuff. But that is just an implementation option. It is a software choice, so it doesn't require a whole load of new specification. So you may not see anything changing 3GPP, but you might see a further pivot on how it gets implemented.
Right. Okay.
But I'm highly even more skeptical about 6G, because it just feels like more and more like a brand.
Yeah.
And yeah, I don't believe there's a timeline for it.
Well, before you guys came on, we were talking about the kind of marketing value of the Gs, which I think has just gone completely now with 5G. I mean, I don't hear any consumers sort of raving about 5G, and I don't see any adverts where I live sort of using Gs in them anymore, which they used to do back in the sort of 3G, 4G days, and the early stages of 5G. I just think I can't see anybody going, look, we are introducing 6G. Maybe in America they will, because they still all love that kind of thing over there. But
I mean, it's on the TV in the advertisements, 5G, but no one knows what that means.
Yeah.
Okay?
Not for me.
I mean, the consumers have no idea.
Yeah, magic.
Do you want a beer, Daniel?
No,
You're good with the shots?
I'm good with the pretty shots.
Have they kicked in yet?
No, I mean, I think they're more beautiful than
I've got a couple of
powerful.
So.
Last time we did a pod with you, Daniel, in the studio in London, you taught me a lot about public cloud.
Yeah.
And how that works, and it was in the context of us sort of shitting on it a bit because there'd been some AWS outage or something like that.
There always is something with AWS before I come onto the podcast, and I know where you're going, because there's another one right now.
Right.
Yeah.
Is there an outage right now?
Well, not an outage, but the UAE AWS region, or one of the availability zones, got hit with something.
In fact, that's funny. That's an elephant in the room that we didn't even talk about in the first half. For some reason, something really dramatic geopolitically always happens just before Mobile World Congress, and this time it was the Iran.
So that is kind of one thing, because people are saying that it feels a bit quieter,
right?
Because of attendance is down apparently a little bit.
Yeah, lots of people couldn't make it.
20%, I heard someone say.
Right.
A lot of people kind of further east routes.
Yeah, well, our freelancer couldn't make it. Yeah. She was coming from India, so.
Yeah, a lot of people in Asia that stop over in like Doha or Dubai got impacted. Some people from that region just decided not to leave because they didn't know if they'd be able to get back.
Yeah.
So yeah, it impacted. I mean, it wasn't like massive. I mean, I think we had a few meetings.
Yeah.
We did some of them remote, is what we ended up doing, but yeah.
Where are things with the agentic AI stuff, which you haven't talked about much at the moment?
Yeah, I mean,
because you've had big overhauls with the software. You did BSS Magic. Kind of came out since the last one.
Yeah.
So you've been talking to people about that a lot.
And, a lot of people are still talking about what AI and agentic AI can do, what it will do, what it's going to be like, and it's very futuristic. And my experience at Totogi with our product, we've I'm kind of simplifying it from BSS Magic and going to just kind of the heart of the issue, which is what I'm calling the Totogi ontology, which is a layer, an ontological layer that represents the telco. And I think what's happening, I had Rick Lievino from Microsoft on my podcast a couple of weeks ago.
We met him years ago, didn't we, in DTW?
Yes.
Yeah, super great guy. And he was sharing with me, AT&T's a big customer. They built over 400 agents and then stopped short of deploying them to production. And their issue is governance, right? Can they really trust the AI agents to work the way that they were designed, make the right decisions?
Yeah.
And so I hear people talking about agents and adding data to agents, but there's a big piece we're missing, which is the enterprise-wide context you need to make sure those agents do the right thing. And an ontology solves that problem, right? And so, the reality of telcos, we have 500 to 1,000 applications from several different vendors. You go look at the definition of a product, and they all have, throughout all those systems, 5G Unlimited is going to have a different product name in all those systems, right? The table names for, how you represent a subscriber will have a different column header, right? AI doesn't know how to discern and figure out, do you mean, when you ask about subscribers, you're talking about lines, you're talking about devices, you're talking about humans, and so when AI doesn't know specifically, it guesses. And so that's where you get into, people say hallucinations, but just like getting it wrong.
Yeah.
And so that context, right, is what...
Sometimes hilariously. Yeah.
Sometimes very badly, right? Yeah. And so the better your context, the better answers you're going to get.
Yeah.
And so...
Is that where the ontology, because I was going to, I don't want to interrupt,
okay.
But you used the word ontology once or twice, and I just thought it might be helpful for you to sort of define it in this context.
Yeah, so, an ontology is really... the way I found out about this was there was a project actually in natural sciences and biology where all these research people were working on DNA, and they all had different names for the same DNA sequence. And so they needed to define an ontology so that everyone knew you were talking about BRAC or whatever that's the only DNA sequence.
Is that like a sort of classification system or something
right,
like that?
so it starts with semantic consistency, right? You can call it whatever you want, but when we all refer to it, we all know it's this thing in the world.
Using a common, mutually understood language.
So it starts with that, and then it kind of evolves into building a knowledge graph or a context graph of how these things relate to each other, right? What are all the allowed actions a subscriber can take, a phone can do, what the call center need, how the processes of a call center. And so once you have that model, that's kind of like step 2. And then the last one is empowering that to take action and be a living model that you can improve upon. And so once you build this system, AI won't make mistakes. If it's not in the ontology, it won't take the action. Yeah. And this is the unlock telcos need to really get out of pilot purgatory, which is what we're in right now, and being able to deploy 400 agents at scale, right? And so we're doing it at Totogi. We have, nearly 10 tier 1 telcos, but 2 that I've been talking about publicly, StarHub and Zain Sudan. And the beauty of it is you don't need to model the entire telco to get started. You don't need to swap out any systems. I'm not saying turn off Amdocs and move to Totogi. I literally put the layer on what we have today, which is a big convoluted mess of a lot of systems and a lot of definitions. And it's a bit, I like to describe it like ocean coral, right? The Great Barrier Reef was not built in one day. It kind of goes in its own direction. And over time, yes, BT will have a Great Barrier Reef ontology, but you can start with something really small and get value, usually in about 4 weeks, deploy it, and then extend it. And that's what we're seeing people do. And it's actually really cool. Yeah.
But the idea would be ultimately that you take out some of these older systems that are
that's what you want to do, right?
Yeah.
That can be a goal. It doesn't have to be a goal.
But that's where the savings would come in, wouldn't it? Surely be.
It could be, but it's really, it's really about making better decisions in the telco rather than saving money. Yeah. So I'll give you a good example. Zain Sudan has this problem called dormant cells, these cells that just kind of fall asleep. They don't alarm, but subscribers are like, my phone doesn't work. Zain Sudan took 48 hours to figure out that it was a dormant cell. We talked to a telco yesterday in the stand who said it took 12 days to figure it out, right? And so, when a cell is down, this is a churn, situation where the subscriber's like, they don't know it's a cell. They're like, the network doesn't work. The network sucks, right? And so we took that down to 30 minutes, right? We can sit there and say, it's a dormant cell, it's this cell, this is where it is. And pulling that information is information from care, where is the cell located, some OSS information, and then the action to go, deploy, field services to go fix it.
I mean, if you go and talk to most operators, one of their big expectations for the future of what their network looks like is that they can do multi-domain root cause automation, right? They can take information that's coming from multiple places within existing systems and correlate it, which at the moment is a massive pain in the ass because it's all sitting in its own management domain.
Yeah.
So a lot of the other vendors as well, a lot of the other vendors are saying they want to do this bottom-up reanalysis and have a big data lake and everything feeds into one place. Challenge with all of it is that creates something that's very proactive and is permanently doing stuff. And I mean, I did my reading on you as well.
Yeah, great.
Because I'm a think person.
Yeah.
The bit which I think is kind of challenging is then if you've got a system that's used to not being particularly messed around with very much, and you put an AI layer which is permanently making changes and permanently tweaking and optimizing, whether the underlying stuff that has to remain in place to begin with can cope with that, whether it will still function the same way if you're permanently kind of going, yeah, we're going to optimize the radio because the traffic has just shifted a bit.
Yeah.
Radio is relatively static in terms of a radio structure. You configure it and it sits there. And the radio waves themselves adapt because you've got more people, you've got less people, but the actual angular tilt or the electrical steering radio waves, that doesn't change ever. And some of the things are like, yeah, we're gonna just turn this cell off and we're gonna adjust everything to cover, or we're gonna change the specific waveform and the way the waveform's structured in the AI RAN Alliance stuff. That's the bit where I kind of go, yeah, it's gonna be quite teething problems to go back and actually get to the point where the value that AI is adding up and down the whole stack actually delivers. And with the trends here, it is AI is the big thing, but it's AI in about 4 or 5 different places.
Yeah, totally.
Right.
And the bit which nobody says is, so if you're going right down in the AI RAN Alliance type stuff and you're doing something that's highly dynamic and permanently adjusting the waveform, what does that do to the way that you're billing? What's the pull through from this AI, which is right in the physical layer, impacting the nature of the service that the end user gets and how he gets charged for it?
Well, I think you capture that in your ontology.
You do, you have to capture it.
You have to.
No, I'm not disagreeing.
Right? And so, like with Zain, right, once we did this, right, we're like, we could tell care, hey, there's a dormant cell. So, right, here's a list of subscribers that are impacted.
Yeah.
Right, we could tell an executive by connecting charging information, this cell has this much revenue running through it. Let's prioritize it against all the dormant cells in the network, right? This one's maybe lower revenue. This one's like super key. Let's go do that. The executives were like, wow, okay, can we start to look at fuel information because they power their cells with diesel
yeah.
and bump that up against the currency conversion because of what we bought versus our reserves, and we can prioritize it. I'm not changing any lower systems, right? All the operational stuff still working as it was a month ago or whatever it was, but now there's so much, they are empowered to make better decisions, right? They're like, okay, we kind of want to look at solar. So we're going to buy 2,000 IoT doohickeys to go install and get some data. And we're like, these are the 200 that matter. Go do these 200. And they're like, oh my gosh. And so we could have done this before. It takes consultants and IT to go to all the different systems, pull it together. Here's your report, Mr. Executive. And the executive has an immediate question like, oh, well, what was the currency conversion? I'll be back, right? And we have this back and forth. But now you're kind of putting this I want to talk to my telco. I want to interact with it with a chatbot to make better decisions and faster decisions. I get what you're talking about, tuning on the stuff. I don't think we're there yet, but being able to say, no, you don't need to go install 2,000 IoT devices. It's 200, and that's just a different kind of project, and you're getting better information. And like I said, it's like Coral, right? Every time we do, they're like, okay, that was just like 2 weeks ago, the solar thing. They're like, what about this? What about that? And we're like, what do you want to do? Is it modeled in the ontology? And then where does that data live? And let's connect it, and you move forward.
So it fundamentally changes the way that you run a network, right? And it's exactly the same iteration that we've seen happen in search, right? Where previously you searched and you said, oh, find me a restaurant which is local to here. Now you ask AI something and it gives you an answer, and sometimes it's hallucinogenic and you end up eating at McDonald's. You have to get past that bit, but other times it gives you the best restaurant in the whole of the
I wouldn't actually mind that, probably.
Yeah, I know. Well, I mean,
maybe it knows you secretly want to go to McDonald's.
That's when it's worrying. But the key thing I think is that it's all happening at different points. So we did research Samsung did research starting in 2018, looking at AI applied to sell on off. It was the first proper ML-based optimization, because it's nice and easy, right? It doesn't impact protocol. You're just turning more cells off more often to save power consumption, and it's a really nice bottom line impactor. So 20% saving, 20% straight off your bottom of your TCO. Great stuff. Parallel to that, we had somebody else doing some work on load balancing. And when you turn cells off, you don't turn them all off at once. You turn off radio bearers one at a time. So you've got 3 radios on one cell. You turn off one, you have 2 left. So the first thing you do is you have to clear everybody off the radio that you want to turn off. And you've got another algorithm which is doing load balancing, trying to push everybody back, because it's trying to balance everything across 3.
Right.
So both were implemented without knowing that the other one was there, and they just fall. And it just caused all kinds of problems. Couldn't work out why our stuff didn't work, until you kind of go, this is a prioritization issue. You take that and you see 40 pieces of research, all happening at the functional layer, all happening independently, and they all get put in a network. The level of interaction is huge, so you have to have a proper structure, which is more than ontology. You need a structure which understands conflict mitigation and prioritization. And the only answer which I've seen in kind of product roadmap walking around so far is an MCP layer, which is not what it's for, or an A2A layer, right? And that's not going to do it. That just helps the agents talk to each other. And when you start to have things at the bottom clashing with intent that comes in at the top, like changing customer intent or changing operational intent, then you've got agents on agents on agents and AI and ML working, which is still, specific optimized algorithmic approaches rather than just an LLM or an SLM. You've got stuff which is so tightly ingrained in the functionality that it's just
an SLM.
It's not even
something else then.
No, it's not even an SLM. It's a specific, it's a long short-term memory algorithmic approach, or it's a deep neural network or a reinforcement neural network. And then you're getting into all the stuff that goes into agentic, but picking up best tool for the optimization because you want it to run really lean and fast.
Yeah.
All of this, up, down, AI percolating in from all sides, plus AI on top of applications. So you've got a good space.
Yeah,
because you can understand it. You can put a wrap
See
around
why
it.
he gets to be visiting professor. I was just going to take a little step back. When I was looking to frame a question to you earlier, Danielle, in the past, the first time you ever came on the pod, we'd been calling you a public cloud cheerleader, and so you lent into that characterization by bringing pom-poms and all that sort of thing, and the
big phone number
and the pointy hand, and then last time we spoke a bit more public cloud, but I think you're a great person to speak to. Obviously, the ubiquitous buzzword is AI, and as Dan just said, AI actually means a ton of different things, and a ton of different applications, and that's one of the annoying things about it. It's so ubiquitous that in some ways I get a bit of fatigue every time it comes out. I'm just like, for God's sake, again.
What you really want to know is, when's it going to kill us?
Well, I was going to lead up to that, but I was going to ask first. Well, no, because Dan was talking about the agentic side, and that is a good sub question. Maybe I'll ask that first thing as you brought it up. As things get more and more automated through these agents and that sort of thing, there is a big sort of risk aspect to it. I mean, on 2 levels. One is just the hackneyed Terminator thing that I always invoke when I talk about AI.
Skylab, your favorite.
But then the other is something on a panel that I did at the show, just talking about a sort of amplification effect. So something, when you just got agent talking to agent, something can go wrong at one place, and then there'll be this ripple of potential sort of malfunction throughout that. So I just wanted to ask you, Danielle, how well you think the concerns about AI and that sort of thing are being addressed at the show and in general.
Well, again, I think, building an ontology is not a weekend project, right? And I think a lot of people are like racing to create agents and obviously you're adding your data to it, but you've got to add your context, right? Otherwise you get AI slop, right?
Yeah.
And so if you use AI, I know Ian likes to go to the library to write his articles and refuses to use Google, but if you ever decided to like go into AI and actually use it, right? You gotta give it instruction. You're like, here's my quality bar, here's the tone, here's the length, here's the angle I want. That's you adding your intelligence, right? It's gonna generate it super fast and you don't have to like type every letter, and that's kind of convenient. But if you're just like, write an article on, Washington, and it's like, I'll guess you meant George Washington, the state of Washington, D.C., right? And so you got to give it, I'm in telco, I'm a journalist. And so that's how you kind of get rid of the AI slop and get high quality work. But it takes...
Is that prompt engineering? Is that the term?
It's a little bit more than that, right? I mean, it starts with prompt engineering, right, for sure. But, context engineering is kind of the next thing. Yeah. But like for an individual, right, it's pretty easy, right? Like if you go into my Claude, it is 1000% DR, right? It has memory now, and so it remembers things across my chat.
So it permanently remembers things that are specific to you.
Oh, here's your agentic 5 minutes of agentic AI that you talked about, and you did a video, and you wrote a blog or two. And so when I say, hey, what would I say about ontology? Boom. It comes out and it's pretty good.
And it's in tone.
Yeah, it's in tone, it knows me, it's great. But like, how do I share that with Totogi, the company? So that when they create a press release, a web page, white paper, it comes out as good as what DR would say. And we're having that problem, right? We're a small company. Imagine 100,000 person telco, right? When you're just like, here are our standards, here's how we make decisions. This is what, when a customer has bad credit and they come in on this line and they want to upgrade, how do we handle that, right? You got to give that information to your agents. Where does that context live? And I'm arguing it lives in the ontology layer.
So you've sort of created an agent that's like a virtual version of you.
Well, I have built.
Wouldn't put it past you.
Well, I call it my second brain.
There we are.
So I have a second brain. It's literally my second. It's like my second brain. It's like me on a piece of paper. And this is where like your ability to communicate and write, that's what you guys do, right? That's your job. Like the better you can write and describe what you want out of AI, that could be a product requirements document for code, right? That could be, obviously marketing materials, whatever you're trying to get AI to do for you, the better you can describe it in natural language, not techie stuff.
Yeah.
Right? I mean, we're at the point now where I tell my team, if you touch and code a single line of code, I'm done with you. You are not allowed to look at it. You're not allowed to type it with your little stupid fingers. You have to talk to it.
They all got stupid fingers.
Right? Your little... we're past that.
Yeah.
See, I think we're past that apart from in certain niche areas, right? So in the startup which we're building, I've got a guy, Andrea, back in Bristol, who has like multiple PhDs in his head, and unsurprisingly, a lot of the value in the startup is based around IP. So he's very careful about the way that he uses AI to help him research what comes next. So he finds examples of code and then he replicates and tweaks and changes so that the IP that we're generating flows into the code, but we use it like 95% of the time. He just...
I mean, you should see my kid code.
Yeah. Oh, yeah,
My kid uses his phone to code.
Is this your kid who's already earning tons of money?
This is a kid that got the $200,000, 6 $200,000 job offers. And he was like, as a freshman, right, first year, his summer, and he's like, Mom, he's like, by the time I graduate, I can make $600,000. Should I drop out? I'm like, absolutely not. You are gonna graduate. I'm like, but your goal when you graduate is now like $1 million job offer, so let's see what we can do.
So you're going 600K is too low?
Correct.
Right. Fair enough.
But we'll see what he ends up doing.
Yeah, it's not the same in the UK because of student-owned stuff.
So,
I mean, it really is. Yeah.
So my son will, he likes to go for a walk. He has his phone. He puts it on dictation. He's talking to Claude Code and Cursor underneath. and he's talks to it and tells it what to do, and keeps walking, waits for it to finish, looks at it, takes a picture of a bug, sends the picture to AI, repeats. That's how he works.
Yeah.
Wow.
That's how he codes. He doesn't look at the code, right? Our stuff, Totogi, right? We did something for a telco that came in on Monday and wanted to, they were like, theoretically speaking, I was like, we'll have it for you done tomorrow, Tuesday, come back. They came back. While they were gone, we generated 222 files of code.
Yep.
We weren't,
Yeah.
I have two guys like in a little tiny staff room that just sit there with Cokes, drinking soda, right? Just pounding it out, and they're just talking to the AI and telling it what to do. And so your natural language needs to be super strong. You need to be super specific about, what you're doing.
You need to understand the systems as well, presumably.
Yeah,
You can't
I mean,
just...
But like, I get to give it the three. I mean, the telco industry is so well documented, right?
Yeah, yeah.
3GPP, 5G standards, right? All this crazy TM Forum has all that stuff.
Yeah.
You're
But,
like,
I mean,
when
Dan's talking about quite specific stuff, going into details about load balancing and everything. He couldn't just get some man off the streets to go.
But I
"Please
could
sort out
get
my network
Santiago
problems."
Tenorio to tell me about it.
Yeah.
You don't think I could extract, Yago's brain and write it down? Just tell me.
No,
Or your brain.
Yeah,
I do completely
he needs him
agree.
anymore.
Just you chat, blah, blah, blah.
So the way that
From my brain.
the way that Andrea
yours.
describes it, he says it's like having access to every postdoctoral researcher who's just finished doing research at your fingertips, and you go and ask it a question, and it says, "Yeah, I know roughly where you're looking for that.
Yeah.
These are the options."
So it's like this. It's like the series Pluribus, basically.
So you go, "Yeah, these are the tools that you could use," and he goes, "Okay, so if I use this tool, what does it tell me, and what does it give me, and blah 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 blah." So the challenge with Andrea, and the challenge that we have in particular, is that the original idea was a problem which is desperate to be solved, right? Like reduce power consumption in GPU, right? Fundamental for all of what we're talking about, all of the AI stuff. And he came up with an idea for a solution, and I've just pushed back gently and said, well, you need to automate that, well, you need to change that piece, well, you need to tweak that piece. And he goes, oh, I don't know if I can. Every time his answer is, I don't know if I'm going to be able to do that. And 3 days later, he comes back and I've done it. I asked my postgraduate assistant what to do, and they gave me some ideas, and now I've got this.
But I would let it go a little bit more. You'd be surprised. Opus 4.6 is freaking amazing.
Yeah.
And you're like, hey, this is what I'm trying to accomplish, right? Whatever the task is. Let me give you a little bit of loose guidelines and a little bit of my brain, but AI, you tell me.
Yeah.
And you, even on super technical topics, you'd be surprised on the quality that it's pumping out.
So the analogy I've drawn to it, particularly if you just let it go and code on its own, the best analogy is the shift from coding HTML to going to WordPress, where previously, people who did the very first web pages sat down and knew how to code HTML, and they did it line by line, and they knew what color red was through an RGB filter, so they could put the number in and everything. And then suddenly you could just drag and drop things in, and you could type
And
it
for
in.
those of us who've never learnt to code, I know you have and I haven't.
You can
then
now.
It's welcome.
But the point is that the web pages still look the same, but they carried a lot of web page bloat. So there's a lot of stuff going on behind the scenes. If you want something that's really optimized and it's got AI as its basis, my concern is that you end up with bloat with this approach. You get the right answer, you get a solution, but if you want something which is specifically optimized to a specific task, you take the tools which AI gives you, and then you go and do it yourself.
Why wouldn't you just specify your performance requirements?
Because it's not a question of performance requirement. The bloat is actually in the number of lines of code. And there's still an artisanal thing of somebody who really can code in depth, but gets it right down to nothing.
I 1,000% disagree. You should give it a try. You should sit there and have another shot.
Have another shot.
No, I will. I'm not on drugs. You make that part. You're like, this needs to be super tight because we're going to put it on a chip.
Yeah, I mean,
right?
we've tried that.
Yeah.
And then I've seen what Andrea's done, right? And it's a tenth of the size. It's, but Andrea's a special guy. Don't go and headhunt him.
No, I won't. I won't.
No, I think it's
He
cool.
doesn't work the way I want people to work.
I think
The way
it's cool. I
that
don't know if you two ever met before, but when I was setting this up, I thought it'd be interesting to see if they had any
When we get to the point,
technological disagreements.
when we get to the point where we fight, yeah.
Yeah, well, I'm happy.
My money's on Danielle.
Yeah, I mean, I'll go the other way on this, right? Which is
Your money's on me.
I'm gonna make this one point, which is we're still early days on the frontier models, right? Opus 4.6 on the SWE independent verified benchmark, which is human tasks on coding benchmarked against humans. Humans get it right about low 70% of the time.
Yeah.
Right? Opus 4.6 is now at 80%. Right? Surpassing not the world's best coders, but the average, 5 years experience engineer. We're still early days. We're not tapping out on this.
It's moving so quickly.
This is within 6 months.
Yeah.
Right. So just bet on that trajectory where that's
That kind
going.
of freaks me out a little bit. I've got to say we're nearly running out of time, so I'm going to start towards wrapping it up. Much as I think we could probably go down this rabbit hole more. But I just wanted to take a little step back, I suppose, to some of the recurring theme that we talk about on the pod when we talk about AI. Not the Terminator stuff, but recently there's been, the stock market's been quite volatile because every time someone publishes something that goes, the AI can do all this stuff that humans used to do, then suddenly all these adjacent companies' share prices go down the toilet because suddenly they think they're all going to be made redundant. And I'm just wondering, just to finish off, what we think about that. So you both given quite a sort of bullish, optimistic view of it. But what about, indulge me, what about the more dystopian AIs, none of us are going to have jobs because AI is doing all this stuff that you've just been detailing. Do you think that's just totally hysterical, or is there some justification?
I think it's a little hysterical. I mean, I get it. Humans don't like change that's happening to them, right? You love it when you decide, hey, I'm going to move or change houses or change jobs. But when that happens to you, it's an awful feeling, right? And so this thing isn't going away, right? In the 1980s, I'm sure the typists were super bummed when word processors and everyone got computers on their desks. Right? The secretaries had a lot less typing to do for people, right? And that was pretty scary, but they were okay. So I think we need people to be in command of the machines, right?
Yeah.
I think engineers now, instead of 2,000 hours of linear serial work, they'll be able to do, and we already have that at Totogi, we have our developers setting up 5 pipelines simultaneously, and you kick this one off to do something, and then you go look at this one and do some stuff, and that's how you work. And so
you're talking about the positive productivity angle, and I get it. I'm not skeptical of that.
That's how kids are going to learn. That's how they're going to work.
But this feels more than other sort of technological disruption. This feels like it replaces humans more than other forms of automation.
Well, if you refuse to use it and not learn, I think you'll kind of be left behind.
Yeah, well, maybe that's why I'm sensitive about it, because I'm being such a Luddite.
It doesn't replace humans in any greater way than when you went from abacuses to calculators. Right? I mean, you
can do work faster.
If you think about the resistance, there was resistance in the UK to allowing calculators in exams for a very long time, until people clocked onto the idea that, do you know what? Yeah, maybe you need to know the theory of what 6 times 9 is. But if you've got something that sits in front of you and tells you it's 54,
did you really have to carry the one?
Yeah, and then the nature of the exam changes, right? Instead of focusing on, do you know the rote stuff, you shift forwards to, do you know how to use the tool that's available to you, and then apply the result. And this is exactly the same, right? Okay. Do you know how to use the tool well, and do you know how to apply the result? And once you know how to apply the result, crikey, then the world is your oyster, right? It's a very different game suddenly. I sit on the board of an educational conferencing company as an advisor, and around about the time that COVID happened, AI started to happen as well, and there's this real kind of seed change shift at that point about, well, what do we do? Do we allow people to use AI to write essays? And what are we going to get? Like 45 formula essays from 45 students that all say the same thing because AI is there. Yeah, you might do if it's 45 people who don't know how to use AI and they just say, write me an essay about whatever, right? But if it's actually people understand how to create a prompt and say, I want it to do this, and I've got an argument I want to form. Can you provide evidence for that? Can you give me citation? Blah, 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 blah. The bit which I think is slightly worrying is the human aspect in that creation, right? So there was a post on LinkedIn a couple of weeks ago which I pushed back on, which was somebody saying, biggest problem I have now is validating whether the citations in my essays are real.
Yeah.
And I pushed back and said, the point about citations, you are meant to have gone and read them.
Yeah.
Right? You don't just include them by rote. You are meant to actually go and find the information in the citations and determine whether it actually does justify your argument.
The only trouble I've got with your example is that I never liked adding 9 to 8 or a more complicated.
Well, it's because you had to carry one.
I mean, no one misses doing basic arithmetic.
Nobody does.
Whereas I like choosing the words myself, and apparently lots of other people do as well.
But this is the thing. I think that's still the argument that says you can choose the words yourself. Because going back to the point that with a DR-based agent,
Or an Ian.
you create an Ian-based agent, which gives you the words, and if you don't know the words that it gives you, you teach it the right words to use.
Yeah.
So you put your personality
but then
into
I'm still not using. At some point, I'm not going to be choosing the words in the same way, am I? If it gets trained to the point where it's 99%, effective, and there's very little tweaking required.
But you get to produce a lot more words.
Yeah. I don't know.
Suppose that's the thing. I mean, I know you well enough, Ian, to know to guess what's going on in your head.
Yeah.
And we've had these conversations about the sort of cognitive flabbiness that can come from it. Suddenly we're having to think less. Let me quickly finish. But I'm also like framing your rebuttal, which is, you wrote tons of stories at the start of Mobile World Congress. What if you were able to write 4 times as many and they were all just as good as what you did? That's the sort of more positive productivity angle. That's all I wanted to finish off saying.
Well, I'm not a writer, right? I have a blog, and for me, I mean, it's hard. Like before AI, I was writing. It was taking me hours to form my thought, get it out there, be short enough that interests a telco exec. And with AI, I am writing faster, but I'm going deeper on the topics where I never had that time before. Okay. Right? I'm and I'll ask AI, what do you think about this? What's the takeaway by a telco exec? What are the people who have objections? And I'm like, ooh, that's actually a good point. And so I can go deeper on that. Yeah. And I think my writing, James Crawshaw was on LinkedIn a couple of weeks ago.
He's pretty prolific on LinkedIn, is James.
Right? I know. I'm like, do you have a job or do you just live on LinkedIn? But he was he's like, yo, DR, your writing was so much better when you didn't use AI. Stop using AI. And I'm like, sorry, James, the AI will continue. It literally makes me better. I think if I compare my old writing to the current writing, AI at least grades it better, right? I think it's better. I get to go deeper on the arguments. And I have a person that's, reading it really deeply. A lot of time my team doesn't have the time. Give me feedback of you're a little bit weak in here. A customer example would be awesome, right? You're kind of being loose with this. I'm like, it's a good point.
Yeah, I mean, I still write. I write a lot on LinkedIn, and I write a lot of technical reports, and I like the kind of the visceral process of doing that.
Yeah.
And there's a process of it helping you order your thoughts while you're writing as well.
That's exactly it, right? So it's not even a question of, okay, I've written this, I'm going to stick it through AI and make it better, because I don't ever feel like it makes it better, because I like the sound of my own voice. There you go, who'd have guessed that? But on the flip side, I like the way that I express things, and I think that's part of what people value in reading what I write sometimes on LinkedIn. Yeah. So I wouldn't want to lose that, but at the same time, it allows me, like you say, to bring in other perspectives, bring in other angles, and still be creative, but be creative in a more thorough way. There was the point when I tried to interrupt you, and
no, it's fine. It's fine.
It's
a fluid conversation.
Yeah, I was doing Mobile World Live today, and it was about disruption, and it shockingly, it ended up being all about AI. So it was a 10 minutes before, go and watch a keynote 5 minutes after thing. And there was a guy there talking about bespoke storytelling, talking about you create your character, you have it in your tone, and saying, intellectual property still matters, but if you don't like the ending of a book, why don't you just have the opportunity to go, yeah, I like the book, but I didn't like the last 20 pages, rewrite it for me where this happens. And it brings it back in that tone. Now, I think there's a lot of concern around what that does to authorship and creativity in the first instance.
Yeah, the creativity rabbit hole is a whole separate podcast by itself.
Yeah, but all the time that you own the process, you do it how you want it.
Yeah.
And it's a tool to use.
Okay.
And there's a tool, or you ignore it.
I'll leave you with one thing, since you love, dystopia and everything. But
I love it. I just sort of see it everywhere.
Well, before programming, right, creating through code was reserved for computer scientists, which took, 4-year degree and a lot of work, and it was the elite few, and they got paid tons and tons of money. We're now at a point where literally anyone can code, and that is awesome. That is huge, right? Like, I think there was a doctor that entered a contest that either OpenAI or Anthropic held, and he came in the top 10 for what he created. The guy, I mean, he's a doctor, right? But he's not a coder, and he coded whatever, and that's pretty wonderful. That's pretty amazing.
It is. No, that's all fair enough. I remain open-minded on both sides, to be honest.
Yeah.
But sometimes, I guess the easiest thing, and I'm going to have to wrap it up here if that's all right with everyone. I know you've got something to go to anyway.
I'm going in about 1 minute.
now.
You're going in 1 minute. Well, then I'll
yeah.
literally wrap up now.
I did think you were going to mic drop on the thing about creativity.
I was just thinking, I mean, one new job function that's existed, certainly for people like me, and I suspect Ian, is someone just to teach us what you two have already worked out, which is how to use it properly. Because I haven't really tried, and that's one of the reasons I'm humble about it. It's not like I've tried it to exhaustively and come to certain conclusions. I'm speaking from a position of almost total ignorance on the matter, and I admit it. But I guess I need someone to sit me down and hold my hand through
I'll
the
be
process.
your tutor.
Right.
Or tonight at Glacier, ask Gemini or ask an AI tool to explain to you how a car engine works in the style of
Ian Morris.
or in the style of Ian Morris, or in the style of Frankie Howard,
Right.
and see what it comes back with. And that was the point where I started.
All right, we'll talk about Ian Morris. We better stop because you've got to run, haven't you, Ian?
Yeah.
Thank you very much, both of
Awesome.
you. Thank you for those cool shots.
Yeah,
I think I'm a bit pissed on them.
Really? Well, you also
I
had
can
a
feel
little
it
bit
a
of
bit. You've got some rosy cheeks going on there. I reckon that's those shots.
Probably is.
Yeah.
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 So
They were
thank you
fun.
very much, Danielle.
Yes.
Once
Gourmet
more, you're the
jello
queen of
shots.
props.
Yes.
And thank you very much, Dan.
No worries.
And thank you very much for listening.